Welcome back to the Moynihan Report. I am your host, Michael Moynihan, and this episode, as always, is brought to you by our friends at FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. And I keep on saying education, but they do that too, and there's a lot of that is needed now. You know them. Go over to thefire.org/Moynihan and sign up for their newsletter, because if you sign up for their newsletter, you will find out about the live event we are doing at the Village Underground on May 6th? I don't have my prompter up, so I'm just saying May 6th. I think it's May 6th. We're doing a debate because we need this now, and FIRE will be there for us. But if you sign up for that newsletter, you'll find out all about the debate, where you can get tickets, who our guests are going to be, and all that stuff. And you also get a bunch of good stuff from FIRE. But today, I'm back. I had an abbreviated week last week, but we are back with a vengeance, because we are back with one of my favorite people, Sam Harris. And it's one of those people where there's too many things to choose from, like neuroscientist, philosopher, making sense podcast, the man who convinced me that meditation was not woo-woo. That's a big thing for me, by the way. The great Sam Harris. Sam, welcome to the show. It's great to finally talk to you.
Yeah. Nice to finally cross paths. I'm a big fan.
So one of the things I noticed, and I'm sure you notice it every day, and I'm actually also interested in how much you tune this out, is that if I'm looking, what's Sam talking about these days? I listen to the podcast. What's he tweeting about? Man, there are a lot of people out there, Sam, that are not big Sam Harris fans all of a sudden.
Oh,
and I look, you might have noticed this, and I look at this kind of list of your ex-friends. Now, we share this in common. There's a lot of people that I knew back in the day, and I could list probably 5 or 6 of them, that have all kind of descended into madness and conspiracy theory. What does that say about us and our ability to choose friends? But where have we gone wrong, in the sense that so many people that I thought were fairly normal and were on the side of the good guys and free speech battles, et cetera, have kind of gone down these rabbit holes of conspiracy theory, and it is all over?
Yeah, well, I do think it's a symptom of what social media and social media combined with the COVID pandemic has done to us. I mean, it's just, I think there are many people, right of center certainly, who've drawn the wrong lessons from the institutional failures during COVID. It's not to say there weren't institutional failures, but they have amplified them in their imaginations. I think by several orders of magnitude, and so we have this kind of anti-establishmentarian lunacy, conspiracy thinking being probably the most egregious strand of it, that has just taken hold right of center. So yeah, it's claimed a lot of people, and there's this fundamental feature of independent media that many of us refer to as audience capture. That accounts for some things. I mean, people with podcasts and newsletters began to notice that the signal in their audience and began to pander to that, and then just got sucked further rightward or weirdistan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, so that, there's some genuine friends who I think are lost, and perhaps well lost at this point. There are other people who I didn't know all that well. I might have just had dinner with them once or twice and had a nice encounter. And I'm now quite a bit more cynical about my ability to judge someone's character based on brief meetings of that kind. And, just good vibes over the course of, a 3-hour dinner is not enough to believe that this person's brain isn't going to go haywire at some point in the future, and I'm going to have to comment on it. So, I actually take no pleasure in finding myself having to talk about friends and former friends and their public indiscretions. But some of these people just have such enormous influence that it would just be professionally irresponsible for me to keep silent at this point.
You've been talking about Joe Rogan recently, who you count as a friend, or counted as a friend. We'll see if that persists. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking of a slightly weirder one, who you wrote a book with and did a film with, Maajid Nawaz, who and you have to talk about these things because the guy has 500,000 Twitter followers, 500,000 Twitter followers. And I used to respect him. I used to read his stuff. I read his book about breaking away from jihadism. And I just, and I don't ask you this to say, like, account for your former friend, but I just don't understand how this stuff happens. I guess with him, it was no surprise to me that David Horowitz was a Stalinist on the left and then became a Stalinist on the right. So I guess Majid is not that surprising. But that kind of conspiracy thinking seems like something that you don't just kind of walk into. I mean, it's just, you don't go from being a normal person who writes for the New York Times and, is just has a normal television career as a pundit. And then like that, you're talking about Klaus Schwab and the World Bank.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in truth, I actually have not followed Majid down his various rabbit holes very far. So I can't even tell you what he believes at this point or what he's putting out there. I may have a lot of affection for the guy. I mean, he's a truly, wonderful person in my experience, personally. But, during COVID, at some point, I got a glimpse of, where he was, the direction he was off and running in, and just kind of averted my eyes, hoping there was not much consequence to what he was doing. I mean, I saw a bunch of stuff around Davos and, I think the word plandemic, it tripped from his tongue a fair number of times. And then I just, I couldn't watch it. So I don't actually, and in recent years, I've been off Twitter for 2.5 years at this point. So I'm not seeing the daily exports of any of these minds really, unless I happen to be following their podcasts or
how has that affected
reading.
your mental health? And I mean that seriously, being off.
I mean, it's an enormous life hack. I mean, every time I talk about this, I've spoken about it to the everlasting boredom of my own audience because I'm just I'm continually embarrassed to admit what an enormous improvement it made to my life, which is the obverse of the fact that I was needlessly degrading the quality of my life for more than a decade, based on my engagement with the platform. And I don't even consider myself among the more pathological users of it. I mean, I tweeted, I think, on average a couple of times a day, but I mean, in reality, it would be, I'd tweet 8 times one day, and then there'd be many days where I wouldn't. But it was segmenting my day, dozens or, when there was some controversy erupting, probably more than 100 times, just looking to see what was being said about me, what was being said in response to the thing I put out there, what was out there that I felt that I needed to comment on or retweet. And even in the good times, even when that seemed sort of professionally productive and socially responsible, and I don't really I don't consider myself somebody whose ethics got especially bent by their engagement with the platform. But what I was seeing was everyone else's ethics, or many other people's ethics, get bent to the point where it was making me a bit of a misanthrope. I mean, it was like this kind of funhouse mirror where I was seeing the worst of people, and the worst of people who, in many cases, I knew, and it was just very corrupting of my priorities, and it would give me a sense of something I should then podcast about, because this tempest in a teapot on Twitter had caught my attention for 24 hours, and it just began to take up way too much bandwidth. And then I just saw the complete destruction of a personality and reputation in the example of Elon Musk, who had been a friend, and I just watched his life and mind get completely derailed by his engagement with the platform. He was kind of an object lesson in what not to do and what not to let happen to you. And insofar as my case resembled his at all, even in miniature, the whole thing was such an ugly influence on our lives. I just decided, okay, I'm going to yank this, and I did it without really much thought, and immediately life improved. I mean, it's just. Again, I'm embarrassed to say it, but of all the things I've done to improve my sense of well-being in the world, to improve my relationships, etc., in at least a decade, more than a decade. Getting off of Twitter was I mean, nothing's even in second place, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's just the
I mean,
thing I did to improve my life.
we have an administration now that just reminds me of Twitter. I mean, everything about it is kind of a Twitter administration. The people who
Yeah.
are elevated, the sort of pathetic nature of the arguments that are made. Elon Musk, you say, is a former friend of yours. And look, I don't like being on Twitter. I'm on it, but I don't tweet very much because I don't look at my mentions because they're
Yeah.
horrible and I don't want to respond to it. It's just bad for me. And then I will feel this need to respond to some egg, that is tweeting from Norway or something about how I'm the worst person on the planet. But then again, there's so much going on there that I need to kind of keep. I mean, I know more about Elon Musk, and he terrifies me more because I have seen what he's become on Twitter. And I'll give you an example of this. Today, or maybe it was yesterday, a tweet from Elon Musk. But you don't see this because you're thankfully not on there. And the tweet was, Sam Harris hates free speech. The
Right, he did
richest
that
man
today?
in the world is
Right.
attacking you
Right.
routinely. The man who has not the levers of power, but almost, I mean, he's obviously stepped away from the White House, but wildly influential, but he can walk by any person on the planet and he's richer than them. And he is regularly denouncing you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, this is what's so awful about this ethically, because in Elon's case, I mean, I know how deep the rot runs because since I left, again, it's about 2.5 years, I have communicated with him exactly twice by email. And both times it was to point out that some right-wing lunatic was manipulating him by taking a clip from my podcast or some other podcast in a very misleading way, making it seem like I believe, the opposite of what I in fact believe. And he was noticing it and reacting to it because, he's the busiest man in the world. He doesn't have time to see what I was actually saying in context. So, he exports this thing to tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. And on 2 occasions, I've just given him all the receipts. I've just said, Elon, look, you're being manipulated by, in some cases, one of the morons who gave us Pizzagate. In other cases, it's somebody of equal moral stature. And I point out, listen, you're in context. I'm saying the opposite of what you think I'm saying here. Why are you doing this? Why aren't you, why are you engaging with this person? Why are you defaming a former friend? And I know, and it's in certain cases, I've enlisted the closest people to him in his life, right? His best friends and his brother, on that email chain. And in at least one case, the most recent case, one of his best friends chimed in and said, "Yeah, Elon, that's I heard the podcast. It's absolutely not what was said in context, right?" So
Yeah.
he's got testimony from someone who he still counts as a good friend, and his response to this personally is, "Go fuck yourself," right? So he's got zero compunction around
Wait, that was the
making.
actual response.
The actual response was, "Go fuck yourself. Do your rebuttals on X. Fucking tool. Go fuck yourself." I mean,
So you were just
in
compacting
number
it a
1,
little
2, and
bit,
3,
for our sake.
right?
Yeah.
I love the self-serving. Do all of this on X to
Yeah.
amplify the awfulness of this digital sewer I preside over. But in any case, he's behaving like a sociopath. He knows he's lying. He knows he's spreading errors. He knows I'm not against free speech. I mean, we can talk about my position on free speech. For some reason, it's so paradoxical that many people don't understand it, but it seems quite straightforward to me. But Elon, he knows he's lying. He knows he's spreading misinformation, and that's what he's been led to based on, perhaps other personality quirks I wasn't aware of. But, above all, I think it's his addiction to and his derangement by this platform.
What is it that, the platform can derange people, and it's hard to tell why. I mean, I understand certain people who desire money, power, the audience capture is very, very real, And I know certain people, like, I mean, the question of Tucker Carlson, how much does he believe this? Because it's so hard to imagine the man who was a very good magazine writer, a very good profile writer. I mean, just generally a smart and nice guy has turned into something rather different. Elon doesn't need money, right? He doesn't need power.
No.
He has endless, strands of power that he can exercise at any time. And then you think that this is a smart guy. I've only interacted with him very briefly once. We were on Bill Maher on the same show. He was the lead interview, and it was very awkward and strange. And he said at that point, "I'm a free speech absolutist," which I've seen some evidence that maybe that's not true since.
Yeah, you think?
But you have the guy that he's a brilliant guy. He's obviously a smart guy, and he's retweeting Pizzagate stuff and stuff that is so easily checkable and falsifiable. Why does that happen to a person like that? And I ask you in particular because I know you've thought about this stuff and you're also friends with him and you can give some insight to the personality that actually falls for this stuff, which is way too easy for a smart person to fall for. So there must be something else at work.
I really just don't know. I have to declare some kind of epistemological bankruptcy here. I mean, I either he has changed a lot, or I never really knew him to the degree that I thought I did. I mean, he was more than an acquaintance. He actually was a friend. But yes, he doesn't need money. He doesn't need anything, but he seems to need attention of a certain kind, and he's getting that he's been getting that for many years from. I mean, I think he bought the platform because he was so addicted to it, and he was so, red-pilled or black-pilled by his engagement with the algorithm and his desire to steer it and his desire to turn it into a digital sandbox for himself. Listen, I mean, there's no one is a free speech absolutist. I mean, let's talk about free speech for a second because I think it's important that it's confusing, and the fact that the most famous man on earth or the second most famous man on earth is telling the world that I'm against free speech as of this hour. It's probably worth commenting on. I think we're very, very lucky to have the First Amendment in America. I think the abridgments of free speech that we're seeing in Western Europe are shocking and totally unproductive. I don't think there should be laws against Holocaust denial. I don't think David Irving should have been thrown in prison for creating a pseudo history of the Holocaust. I think we have the laws right in America, and I think other open societies should emulate us in having something like a commitment to virtual free speech absolutism at the level of what a person has the political and civil rights to do. But no one is a free speech absolutist with respect to their businesses, their platforms, their publishing, their podcasts. Everyone is in the curation business. Everyone has to make editorial decisions. Even 4chan has a moderation policy. I mean, 4chan is just about as vile a place on the internet as you can find. They still don't allow everything, right? You can get kicked off 4chan, you can get moderated, you can get your post taken down, right? And Elon is nowhere near being a free speech absolutist. In fact, he's quite biased. He deplatforms people he doesn't like. He amplifies idiots he does like for some reason. He tunes the algorithm to boost himself preferentially. He capitulates to the authoritarian rulings of other countries that he wants to function in, and he silences dissidents. And I think he even there's some evidence of him giving data to authoritarian regimes that have resulted in the arrest of people on Twitter, right? So this guy's not a free speech absolutist. He's, if anything, a hypocrite if he actually had principles he was trying to live by there. But no one can be a free speech absolutist. I mean, you would have, these would not be businesses that could be run. I mean, you certainly couldn't place ads against the awfulness that would result if you had no moderation policy on any of these social media platforms. And so it is with podcasts. I mean, I think Joe Rogan and other podcasters should be free to talk to anyone they want. I'm not begrudging them the conversations. What I'm begrudging them is the fact that, as your platform grows and you start to reach tens of millions of people, if your only contribution to dissecting the ethics of the war in Gaza or the war in Ukraine is to have comedians and self-taught historians on to spread misinformation, and you haven't done any homework, so you're not even alert to the fact that they are spreading misinformation, and in the case of some people, recycling the pseudo history of someone like David Irving, you're just misleading tens of millions of people at a stretch, and it's irresponsible, and it has social consequences. And in the context of the greatest eruption of anti-Semitism any of us have experienced in our lifetime, it's deeply destructive. And so that's just has to be pointed out. It has nothing to do with the First Amendment. Of course, you have the First Amendment right to do this, as I think you should have, but others have the First Amendment right to criticize you for it.
What is that responsibility? I mean, I hear that phrase a lot. I mean, you are Joe Rogan, you've got $100 million contract from Spotify. I mean, and when he came over to Spotify, he was forced to purge a bunch of episodes with people that were undesirable. Gavin McGinnis and people like this. There's probably 10 or 15 of them, maybe even more, that they just got rid of. And now he has his show there. He has a responsibility to an audience of 20, 30, who knows? It's the biggest podcast in America. But when he's talking about World War II, and having a guy like Daryl Cooper on, who, as you point out, is just using warmed over David Irving, which, by the way, I had pointed out a long time ago, and my pal on Twitter and pal in real life, Noam Dorman, also pointed it out. And now he's just quite open about it and says, Hitler's War, David Irving's 1977 book, which became actually a Holocaust denial book, and its second printing in, I think, 1990. But this is the guy who's on. He's just some random guy. But the response from these people is like, look, you're experts. Look what experts have gotten us. Experts got us into X, Y, and Z. COVID, you can name it. DEI, they can bring up anything. Yeah. And what is, this kind of scorn for expertise, which I saw recently after a Joe Rogan episode, really exploding online. Oh, the experts and traveling to Gaza, that makes you an expert. I mean, it's been a very, very sort of knuckle-dragging argument. People aren't actually addressing the issues at hand. But when you are Joe Rogan, you have a responsibility. What does that mean? Can you have that guy on and not have Andrew Roberts, a specialist in Churchill, or a Holocaust scholar, to come on and actually give the real story?
Well, I don't think you should. I mean, again, the problem is that Joe, because he isn't really a student of this topic, he doesn't know that he's in the presence of a non-expert. I mean, he knows by virtue of a lack of credential, this person doesn't have the standard biography, so as to give them their expertise, but he's being treated like an expert. I mean, Joe is a huge fan of Daryl's podcast. Daryl will go on for tens of hours on these topics. And he's a very talented podcaster.
Yeah.
No one. This is genuinely confusing to people because the people who are criticizing Joe now for having non-experts on and listening to them at length and not rebutting them with real expertise are not arguing for mere credentialism. It's not just that you need a PhD in the discipline and that's the answer. In fact, Joe's had many people with the right credentials on his podcast who are just kooks and crackpots and lunatics on their various topics. He certainly did this with COVID, right? He had some real doctors on. No one can challenge their CVs, but you have 10 minutes of listening to these guys talk, and you can
Robert
see
Malone's,
they have a screw loose.
Whoever these people
yeah,
are, right? Malone,
yeah. I mean, this guy. Well, when the guy tells you that he's been denied a Nobel Prize, right? You're in the presence of at least a personality disorder, right? I mean, this is just not the way credible intellectuals have conversations. I mean, Joe has a taste for conspiracy theories. He has a taste for the contrarian take. The real answer is rather often boring, and the answer involving the CIA doing something covertly is more. And so he had someone like RFK Jr. on to talk about everything under the sun. And yeah, but you listen to RFK Jr. talk, and the crankishness just, comes out of his pores. I mean, the guy he's certain that the CIA killed his father and his uncle, right? I mean, let's start there. He's living in a country. He's now, running the health infrastructure for a country that he thinks murdered, some of his closest family members very publicly, and they got away with it. You get him talking about vaccines or really anything relevant to public health, and you don't have to wait long before the lies and the confabulations and the half-truths come tumbling out. But Joe is not, on the other side of that table, Joe is not debunking any of it, right? He's just swallowing it. And it's important to point out that on a topic that he knows something about, that he has deep convictions on, he would never do that. If he has someone across the table from him who's not making sense about mixed martial arts, he destroys that person, right? He might do it nicely, but he's got no patience for it. If you utter a few sentences that make it clear that you don't know what a triangle choke is, well, then you've lost all your credibility instantly. It's a recoverable error, and the conversation is put on a very different footing. That's what should happen when you're talking about the Holocaust and you divulge this piece of inside knowledge, wherein the Nazis never intended to kill the Jews. It's actually with an act of compassion. They just realized that once they'd rounded them all up in concentration camps, they didn't have the infrastructure to feed them.
Yeah.
And might it not be more compassionate to euthanize them all with gas? Yeah, how did that happen? What a strange wrinkle in German history there.
Let me, play on their side just for a minute and say that there's a few things that I think are true, or I don't know how much to apportion responsibility, but the institutions, and I know I cannot stand when people say that, and I'm going to say it myself, it's a bullshit thing. There's so many quote unquote institutions, but there are people who feel like they've been lied to, and that in some cases is actually true, right? I mean,
Yeah.
When you talk about stuff that you were talking about in 2017, 18, 19, what became a sort of DEI, which is another kind of acronym I think is useless in this thing, but talking about these, the mania had gripped corporate America and gripped some of these universities and the students. I mean, I saw today that Swarthmore College has a Students for Justice in Palestine who posted on their Instagram feed praise for the attack in Kashmir by the jihadists that killed a bunch of tourists. And they said, if you don't, this is an anti-colonial strike, et cetera. This is, 1968 in Germany, not 1933, 1968, like Baader-Meinhof student radicalism that are supporting violence and stuff. So there's all this madness of institutions. I was talking to Jonah Goldberg about this today. The stuff about Harvard, this is the wrong way to go about it, but is there not a case to be made that this place is infected with so many bad ideas and run by so many bad people that you understand where some of this stuff comes from? Is the other side, and I don't know what the sides are, but the other side, people on the left say, are they to blame for some of this stuff? And it just went too far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm nearly as radicalized and certainly as allergic to the so-called woke mind virus as Elon or Joe or anyone who got super red pilled and just lurched into Trumpistan, right? The only difference is that I have kept in view all of the awfulness that is real right of center, right? So it's like, yes, I can see the moral confusion, the moral panics, the dishonesty, all of it on the far left. But there's just as much to criticize, and sometimes by the same logic, on the far right. And for some reason, the people we're talking about and many others can't keep both of the problems in view simultaneously, right? They felt they needed to pick a side and then lie about all the incredibly dangerous developments happening right of center in America. I mean, just if you look at what we've witnessed in the second Trump term, for now nearly 100 days, I mean, it's certainly worse than many of us imagined possible. I mean, we're witnessing a something like the complete destruction of our standing in the world, right? I mean, there's no pretense of moral virtue coming from our country toward allies and enemies simultaneously. I mean, both our allies, our erstwhile allies, and our enemies look at us as objects of revulsion or comedy or pity, or I mean, depending on the mood. I mean, we're in free fall reputationally on the world stage. It's just been mortifying to watch. And the people we're talking about feel the need for some reason to lie about all of that, right? I mean, these are people who, when Trump, I think, pretty obviously misspeaks, right? I don't think he ever intended to say this, but when he blurts out that Ukraine started the war, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you remember that moment, but he was saying something. He was kind of just riffing, and he was saying, you shouldn't have been there. You should have stopped it. You shouldn't have started it, right? And once that phrase came out, you shouldn't have started it, he got anchored to it and doubled down, and then it just became this ghastly Emperor's New Clothes phenomenon where everyone had to pretend that somehow the utterance made sense. Yeah, it is. I mean, there used to be a Republican Party. Now there is this entirely bizarre personality cult that's functioning by a very different logic. And for some reason, some of the people we've named are choosing not to see the dysfunction there at all, the corruption there at all. Many, in Elon's case, he's decided to participate in it, up to his eyebrows, and yet, yes, 95% of what they would have to say about the indiscretions of the far left and the institutional capture, certainly going back to 2019, 2020. I agree with all of that, and I've criticized all of that. I've spent more time criticizing that. Certainly before the election, this was true. I spent more time criticizing the far left than Trump or Trumpism on my podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you writing a piece defending Trump, actually, and saying, the Charlottesville good people on both sides was taken out of context, and the quote that wouldn't die. What do you think the worst excess is? Because I think right now in the second term, because I think that I am in the same place as you. I didn't think it was going to be nearly as bad as this, and I didn't think that the people who were around him, I thought some of them would kind of protect him, as happened the first time around. There was going to be people like Marco Rubio, who has become a simpering sycophant and just disgraced himself for the past 3 months. But there's been so much happening. The Steve Bannon flood the zone with bullshit. What is it that is, most kind of offensive to you so far? Because there's a lot to choose from. And I'll just give you a starting point. I would say the law firm stuff is going after law firms and signing executive orders targeting individual citizens is something I never thought I would see.
Yeah, that's very scary, and the capitulation to it is very scary. I mean, if the best law firms in the country feel that they can't fight on their own territory, right? I mean, they can't fight legally against this administration. That's pretty terrifying, right? I mean, that's yes, and these executive orders are insane. It's just targeted to bankrupt these individuals for having prosecuted him previously. I mean, there's so much of it. The two Oval Office spectacles, which were just grotesque. The one with Zelensky and the one with Bukele. I mean, just for different reasons, those were just shocking, Banana Republic style pieces of authoritarian communication that were, just signaled to the whole, again, I view this very much from the outside. I mean, the inside view is also galling and should worry us. But when I just look at what we look like from abroad, again, both from friends and enemies. I mean, I think it should be of grave concern that Russia has gotten happier and happier every time they've contemplated the series of own goals we have scored on ourselves. And the communications from the Kremlin and on Russian television. I mean, just after that Zelensky press conference, if Trump isn't a Russian asset, one wonders, how he could do a better impression of one, right? I mean, he's doing exactly what Putin would want. Yeah, I mean, the Bukele moment was just despicable for its own reasons. I mean, it was all right on the surface. You had the president kind of laughing over the fate of a man sent to effectively a gulag in El Salvador, who the administration admitted had been sent in error. Right now, maybe they're now backpedaling on that confession, but at the time,
But that lawyer was
it was
fired,
acknowledged
by
by.
the way.
What was that?
That lawyer was fired, the one who
Oh, okay.
mistakenly
But at the
said the truth. Yeah.
at the time, that he yet had not been denied. Right? It was just everyone knew that he was sent in error, but it was still an object of comedy for the president and the administration that he was there, and no one had the authority to get him back. I mean, it was just awful, and again, it's awful by virtue of the fact that we can no longer even pretend to hold the moral high ground. I mean, we're not on the side of democracies and open societies struggling to be free, right? We're patently not. We're on the side of authoritarians who we can cut a deal with. It's just very dark, and the fact that so many people, again, the kinds of people we've been mentioning here, don't seem to care about that. I mean, many of these people were very concerned about so-called authoritarianism, right? They were worried about the Twitter files. I mean, we're talking about there's a whole gaggle of red-pilled independent media voices on Substack and in podcasts and elsewhere who thought that the Twitter files was just the story of the decade, right? The Joe Biden, his administration asking for, and it actually wasn't even his administration. Wasn't even in office at the time, but his campaign was asking for naked photos of Hunter Biden to be taken off of Twitter, and somehow that was just the most shocking Orwellian overreach of the U.S. government. And yet, these are precisely the people who now don't bat an eye at people being disappeared into gulags without due process, and our allies being sold out and thrown into the maw of Russia. I mean, we've got a president and his rapacious family launching meme coins before the inauguration, which in addition to just grifting their credulous cult, they're creating a mechanism whereby opportunists and foreign agents can pay bribes, undetected to curry favor with the Trump regime. I mean, it is so corrupt. If you imagine Biden or much less Obama doing 1/100th of that, they would never stop talking about it right of center. And yet it's, again, as you said, they've flooded the zone with so much shit that we can barely keep that in view. I mean, well, who is talking about the meme coin now? I mean, the meme coin, if it was the only thing he did, would have been such a shocking piece of evidence for the personal corruption of a sitting president that we should never have stopped talking about it. I mean, it should be impeachable. I mean, it's just unbelievable that we're in this situation. And it's an afterthought.
You're also leaving out the best part, which was recently that they announced that if the top 200 people on, I believe they said, the leaderboard, which would be owners of the Trump meme coin, can come to the White House and have a dinner or a reception with the president. And if you are in the top echelons, you have a smaller gathering at Mar-a-Lago or something. You're literally buying access through a meme coin too. That's the weirdest thing, which has no utility whatsoever beyond making that family rich. Where does it end? I mean, in the sense that, like, I have seen already I mean, Donald Trump's approval ratings in his first 100 days are the lowest of any president ever recorded. I mean, George W. Bush in 2000 was like 62%, 63%. He's hovering around 40. That's a pretty precipitous drop in the past month and a half or 2 months. People in the Republican Party are a few of them, stiffening their spines. Don Bacon. I mean, we saw the woman from who's the chief national security correspondent, I think, for Fox News today, tweeting and ripping Trump for giving everything to the Russians. And so there's literally these little murmurs here and there. And I also think that, all this tariff talk, which is nothing but destructive. It's, every economist on earth says this is not only chaotically implemented, it should never be implemented in the first place because it's just bad economics. That's going to redound on people, then their phones get more expensive, their food gets more expensive. Like, it can't last forever, right? I mean, do you think that this flames out? Because maybe I'm wrong about this, I have always had a certain amount of trust in the American people to do the wrong thing and then right the course at some point.
Yeah, well, I think there's reason to hope that the corruption of this administration could be equaled or even exceeded by its incompetence, right? So, the tariff thing is quite a shocking own goal. I mean, there's every sign that this is not at all 4D chess. This is just him lurching around, responding to signs of emergency in the bond market, and he's just, for whatever reason, he thinks tariffs are the most important thing in the world. And as I've said, there's only 3 economists I can find who agree with him, and 2 of them are Peter Navarro. So it's one can only hope that if there is an economic calamity as a result, in the stock market, or just inflation, or some combination of indices, that's the kind of feedback that will be undeniable, right? I mean, the problem with his personal corruption, the bribes that will be paid to him, the erosion of our civil liberties, the lack of due process in deportations, the unraveling of U.S. foreign policy, the gutting of scientific research, cuts of 50% or more to the National Science Foundation. Cancer cures going undiscovered, et cetera. Like, the problem with all of that is that it's pretty invisible. You're like a kind of wonkish person who wants to pay attention to those things. At least half of our society is totally checked out there, and it's not going to notice any of that. They're going to hear, half-truths spun up on Fox or social media that reframe all of that as just, a left-wing conspiracy. Or some kind of legacy of the Biden administration. I mean, there's no end to the lying that they're capable of. But the one thing you really can't lie about are things like the now much fabled price of eggs, or what's happening in the stock market, right? So if the stock market craters, or inflation goes nuts, or you get your mortgage is now going to be 10%. That feedback will be undeniable, and it's hard to hope for a recession or worse, but I think that's really the only flavor of information that will arrest the attention of people right of center who will be forced to realize, okay, whatever Trump's song and dance is today about this, I just spent $47 for a dozen of eggs. That's not right. That's just that's going to be, there has to be, there's no way Biden is responsible for that. And then hopefully there'll be some political change.
We'll ask you one more, what my colleague and co-host in the Fifth Column, Matt Welch, calls the French goodbye, which is the needlessly complex final question. But or difficult, not complex, but difficult to answer. How does one go about, and I know what you're saying, like a political disaster can probably shake the Republican Party by its lapels because the only purpose is to win. If they start losing, we saw a bit of that in the midterms in 2022. I thought it was going to have an effect, but apparently not. And this is a kind of a Joe Biden problem more than anything. But how do you get people to trust institutions again. I mean, if you look, I lived in Scandinavia for a long time. In any study of Scandinavia, it's always, dispensed with in the first couple of sentences of the précis, where they're throat clearing and say, well, these are high trust societies. Everyone trusts each other. It's very, very Swedish, Denmark, et cetera. But we're not only a low trust society, we feel like an almost no trust society now. And there was somebody I saw on Twitter who's one of these kind of super red-pilled people, and they said, confess your unpopular opinion. And this guy said, the mainstream media is far more correct than the alternative media when it just comes to facts. It's just like people jumping on him. And it's obviously true, right? But you look at what happens at Columbia, this madness, it's starting again. I mean, intimidating these students and, these wacko sort of pro-terrorist groups that are praising attacks in Kashmir. Is there a possibility that we can actually get back to a place where people have trust in the news media, in the university system, in government in general? Or is all of this stuff why Tucker Carlson is talking about JFK? Why is he talking about JFK? Why is he talking about the UFO files? Because he's trying to make you think that the deep state is the thing that has existed for hundreds of years and we have to destroy it. Is there any getting rid of that? Because I fear if we can't get rid of that way of thinking, that we're stuck here for a very long time.
Well, eventually something's going to break, and it's going to be clear that only experts know why it broke and know how to fix it, right? So, I mean, and there are certainly areas in our lives where there is no question that expertise is a thing and no one's going to debate it. I mean, I always go back to the airplane example because it's so vivid. Everyone has this visceral experience of what it's like to be in a tube at 30,000 feet and, there's a pilot in the cockpit and you want that person not to be, self-taught on their home simulator. You want them to have gone through all the necessary regulations and have learned everything that they are supposed to have learned, and no one's an iconoclast with respect to their expectations for safety and regulatory oversight with respect to how planes function, and we want air traffic controllers who are not overworked and who have the right equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And there's just at 30,000 feet, there's basically no tolerance for idiosyncrasy and somebody blurting out that they've got a better idea about how to fly the plane, right? I mean, we want shit to work, and we want the most qualified people to have designed systems. I mean, more than relying on individual personalities who are going to get it right day after day. We want systems that again, designed by experts. And designed by and codified into institutions and institutional knowledge, such that we're not left making it up from scratch with each year, each generation. There's just a lot that is known about so much that we care about, and how to safeguard what we care about, and that is expertise in all its dimensions. And it gets enshrined in institutions, and there's no question that institutions can get corrupted. There's no question that they're faddish ideas that can be slow to be purged, and there are ideologies that can capture various institutions, and that certainly happened in recent years. And we've complained, and I've complained about that a ton. And yet, the thing to notice at the end of the day is that the only real antidote to those failures of expertise when they're is the application of yet more expertise, right? I mean, so if RFK Jr. is right about something, let's say RFK Jr. is right that one of our vaccines is actually causing autism, right? There's no evidence that that's the case, but let's say he's just right about that. How do we figure that out, right? And how do we respond to it? How do we remediate it? How do we cease to make that error, right? How do we understand its pharmacology, right? It's going to be real scientists doing that work. It's not going to be, somebody's uncle with strong opinions about vaccines doing the work. It's real scientists. So you never can step outside the circle of expertise, even while criticizing institutions and failures of expertise. I mean, the answer to every scientific fraud is, or scientific error, is not astrology, it's not religion, it's more science, better science, scientific integrity. And that's, again, that's true with outside of science, with any kind of expertise. What's the answer to journalistic fraud and journalistic error? Real journalism, real journalistic integrity, real standards of evidence. And so again, whenever these people are right about anything, from coming from Podcastistan or Substackistan, just throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. When something really does stick, again, we need experts in the various domains to figure out what's real and to figure out what to change. And so that's not going away. And the question is, how much pain do we have to suffer in the meantime before we all get on the same page about this?
I mean, I've criticized these institutions. I've made something of a career out of it. I made a podcast out of it, and kind of doing it again. But I've always said the same thing: is that if there are problems in the institutions, you don't Nagasaki the institutions. You send a Gurkha in with his knife in his teeth, and he sneaks in and gets the guys that are bad, and then we replace them with the guys that are good, or different people. Like, every failure should not precipitate the end of an institution entirely. And that seems to be the kind of thinking that you see from most of these people. It's like, well, the institutions are bad. But we've seen this in the past. Remember The Best and the Brightest. The reason that book was called The Best and the Brightest, the Dean Rusks of the world, all the guys that went to Harvard, got us into this quagmire of Vietnam. And what was the response from the more extreme people was, let's blow things up. Let's become domestic terrorists, etc. That didn't work, and it gave us the radicalism in universities that we still kind of live with today. But replacing one radicalism with a different one, it seems to me to be rather stupid and naive. But I hope.
Also, the other thing to point out is that the failures we notice in the institutions, the failures of scientific objectivity or honesty, journalistic objectivity or honesty. And there are many, and we, again, you and I and many people left of center have complained about them and criticized them. They are failures by reference to the intellectual standards of the institutions themselves. And the crucial thing to point out is these are standards that many of these people right of center don't even have a pretense of adhering to themselves, right? So, like, the Tucker Carlsons of the world are not abiding by the standards they're using to judge the journalistic failures of the New York Times or any real journalistic enterprise, right? Fox News is not holding itself to the standards by which it would pillory even CNN, its close cousin, and it's. So this is asymmetric warfare on some level, and it's understandable. But we should just notice that this is, I mean, the thing I've been criticizing Joe Rogan for in the presence of someone like Daryl Cooper is a complete abdication of journalistic responsibility in the presence of just a fount of misinformation and consequential misinformation. He would criticize if there was even a semblance of such a thing happening in the New York Times. He and others would be right to criticize it because it would be a complete failure of the mandate of a real journalistic institution like the New York Times.
Yeah, well, if you see an interview with Kamala Harris, when she didn't give many of them, and there was no pushback on particularly wild claims, you would hear about that from most of these people. All right, Sam, we have an audience that watches on Zoom. We have. Can we take one question from Sarah? Do we have Sarah? Is that okay with you, Sam? Sarah, I believe is Sarah. You there? How you doing, Sarah?
Yes.
Hey, Sarah.
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
I'm a big fan of you both. My question is for Sam. I'm from Northern California. I used to be really progressive. I've really changed over time. A lot of the more conservative people have left the state, but when you poll them on stuff like, should Prop 36 pass and it's a crime to steal and, organized retail theft, the polling is clear. People are more conservative than they vote in terms of their registration. A lot of people have been leaving the state, and it's hard to know how to be effective in the state when demographics have changed. Any advice? I really liked the episode with Caruso about the LA fires.
Mhm.
I'd like that sort of common sense governing and how to see it happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm hopeful the pendulum is in the process of swinging back in the state. I mean, I think the extreme moment. I don't think it got ever swung further out than the defund the police slogan. I mean, that was just a patent piece of masochistic absurdity that the moment it was uttered, everyone knew, okay, we have crossed over into something totally untenable. Notwithstanding the fact that at that moment NPR would publish an op-ed defending looting as a version of free speech and wealth redistribution. And I think the New York Times published an op-ed saying, yes, we really do mean defund the police. But that was kind of the high watermark of stupidity. And I do think there's very little patience for that. I mean, the social dysfunction we've seen in California around homelessness and crime, and looting, I think, yeah, I mean, I guess anything's possible, but I do think that there's much less energy there now, and we will see the next election cycle will be quite a bit saner on those topics.
Well, thank you for the question, and I thank Sam for reminding me of the New York Times piece that's saying that we should actually defund the police. That wasn't just a slogan. Okay, we're going to take one more quickly from Bryce. Is that Bryce? We have Bryce there to ask a question of Sam.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Bryce. How are you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks, guys, for doing this. I have a question for both of you. So I am wondering whether there is any utility in even the next 10 to 20 years of third parties. I volunteer for the Forward Party here in Utah. I was part of the signature gathering effort to get it formally recognized on the ballot. But a lot of people are, as you said, blackpilled about third parties, and the two-party system in general is one reason I have started volunteering for Forward. But at the same time, I realize it's going to be a decades-long effort to try to get independent redistricting committees formalized in the state, and some of the also promote alternative voting methods. So I'm wondering, do you guys think I'm wasting my time with this, or what is, is there any utility to it? Because the libertarians and Greens have always tended to be very purist. What's the word? Purist.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Purist. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, what do you guys think about a place like Forward where there's no real platform other than just election reform?
Well, it's not going to work, number one. But let me give you a quick answer, Bryce. I appreciate the question.
Say more.
The one thing I'm going to say about this is that, it's the times that it makes me wish we were living in a European parliamentary democracy, because in those places you have to form coalitions. And so when you have 15, 20 parties, you have to meet a threshold to get into parliament. And at that point, you form coalitions. If the Republican Party was like that, if we had a situation like that, I think it would provoke a bit more bravery, quote unquote bravery. And people would say, well, we don't have to be in the majority 50%, 90, 48% party. We can be in the kind of free market Catholic party or whatever, and they can be much more honest and open. They wouldn't be feared about being primaried and all this stuff. So it would be great if third parties were a thing, and you can't. They will never be a thing if you don't keep working at it. But I will say that also the number of people that kind of brutalized me during the last election, saying, if you vote for X, Y, and Z, you're allowing fill in the blank Kamala Harris to win, Donald Trump to win. Don't listen to that. I mean, not voting is also a choice. Not voting for two crappy candidates is also a choice. It's sending a message that you think they're both hideous and awful, and we can do better. But yeah, no, it's a very, very much an uphill struggle. And, we thought in 2016, the Libertarian Party, because of Donald Trump, was going to, with Gary Johnson, was going to do well. And that didn't happen. It was Ross Perot, and that's the best we could do. And then Ross Perot became Donald Trump, So, Sam, do you have any opinion on third parties?
Yeah, no, I think I share your concern that it just seems like a quixotic and therefore doomed use of time, right? I mean, it's just so unlikely to bear fruit. I mean, I think there are probably nearer goals that are very much in line with what the Forward Party would want. I mean, things like ranked choice voting and open primaries, which could, I guess that's, that could be achievable. But yeah, I just think we're so locked into a two-party system that I think we just want better candidates and better policies. We should fight for sanity. I mean, to take the Democratic side as our focus, I just think the Democratic Party needs a full reboot. It needs to learn the lessons of 2024. It needs to know why it lost. It needs to know that identity politics is just doomed, and that we should just get past all of this, the politics of race, the politics of gender confusion, and we need sane policies. We need to deal with things like wealth inequality and real risks that we confront in the world. And we need charismatic, sane leaders, with their heads screwed on straight, who aren't sinister narcissists, if such a person can be found. And we need to promote them and have them be actually more attractive than the alternative right of center, which which shouldn't be hard, because right of center really is just a proper personality cult, right? It's just not functioning by normal political physics, and it's obviously dangerous. I mean, the principles of loyalty tests throughout the government. I mean, it's just so obviously not selecting for expertise, much less integrity, and it's awful. I mean, it's a clown car of grifters and conspiracists and loons running our government right now, and it's we're just watching it bump into hard objects out there in the real world, and we're paying the price for it, and we're not even at 100 days the day we're having this conversation.
Well, I want to thank Sam Harris for leaving us on the most positive
Yeah,
note.
yeah. I'm a barrel of laughs, aren't I?
Like, God,
Yeah.
I'm just going to go, weep in the corner and put the Smiths on. Sam, thank you. I mean, make sure you all know Sam's podcast. The meditation app. You should get the meditation app. You know why? Because he hates everything that's happening so much, and he does it in such a calm way. It's because he meditates. I don't, and I got to start doing it. So thank you, Sam Harris. We appreciate it, and hope to talk to you again soon. And thanks to all of you for joining us. We will be back on Tuesday. We had a weird schedule this week, but we're getting back to normal. And we are going to do a special episode on Tuesday on everything you ever wanted to know about free speech. But we're afraid to ask. You're not afraid to ask. But we're going to have FIRE's legal director, Will Creeley. FIRE, who sponsors the show, our favorite people, and they know everything there is to know about all of these cases that are percolating before the courts, and particularly stuff about free speech. So come back on Tuesday and talk with me and Will Creeley. We will see you then.